some point, midway through one of those sentences, my audience will have started hearing me. Everybody, it's Rail Natter. We're going. It's happening. What a delight to have you for the last live episode of 2025. Where did that go? Good grief. I'm excited because we have a guest, possibly the first live guest in ages, actually, because of the way that technology has been, but I think I've now mastered it, which will definitely help me to be less anxious about other guests joining in the future. Poggy's my guinea pig on this one. Yeah, we have Poggy Murray Whitham joining us, which I'm extremely pleased about. Poggy's hiding in the green room, waiting for me to actually formally start the episode, which I shall do. Before we start the episode and introduce what on earth we're going to be talking about, I want to just say a quick thank you. A thank you to the Patreon supporters. Now and always, for those of you who've been supporting all year, and for the new people who've dropped in as we've started ramping up kind of bonus content, and I've changed the shape of the Patreon a little bit. Thank you so much. There'll be a bonus episode or two for you this over the winter season, but you'll be getting some special shout outs in one of them later on. So thank you to you, and without further ado, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the In-City 225 fades away, as do my cheaply inserted jingle bells with a gif of snow upon the titles, I am delighted. Oh, that's my entire face. That's no good to anyone. What I need to do is do this. And we got there in the end. Right, okay. First, Poggy, welcome. Hello. Let me make this even better by saying, Poggy Murray Whitham, it's a delight to have you on Rail Natter. This has been a long time coming because I'm useless, but we've got there eventually. Poggy, how are you? A delight to see you.
Not bad. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah,
I was trying to. Yeah, we said about doing this on stage at Rail Live, and that was. It feels like hundreds and hundreds.
I was going to say, yeah, we were at Rail Live yakking away in what some have called the Gareth tent. I do not. It's not called that, and I refute anyone who says that that's what it's called. But yeah, the tent that I'm in solidly for 2 days, and by the end of it, it smells like me. Yeah, you're in there, and we had a really good chat. It was the end of the day, but I was really it was a little bit quiet at the start, and I was like, oh no, come on. But actually, there are a few people who came and joined, and it ended up being a really good discussion with some really good questions, and people came away from it commenting on how good a session it had been. And we'd had a pre-chat, and I knew it was going to be good anyway because of just how we had a good chat beforehand. But I knew that it was. I just wanted to do this conversation or elements of this conversation again here for our Rail Natter audience and for all to see, given that Rail Live is exclusive. So it was a delight to have you along. But I want to take the chance to let you actually introduce yourself, because here's you with a mic. Poggy, I'll let you sort of tell people who you are, what you do, and then obviously that story will unfold a little bit more, and by the end of it, people have a much better idea. But I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit.
Oh, so yeah, as you say, Poggy Murray Whitham. I'm an engineer by background, professionally accredited automation engineer. Spent just over 10 years in the automation engineering sector, where I worked from entry level up to senior management, became a chartered manager and a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute, and then pivoted my career to refocus from the technical side to the more human side of engineering, as I say. I'd been involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion work for 16 years, ever since university. But they were two parallels. I was an engineer and I was a DEI advocate, and those parallels they trended towards each other, but they didn't really fully cross until last year. So.
Yeah, that disconnect. And it's just kind of like, okay, the title's a little bit sort of clicky, but the point is that gap, it's a key. We're going to go through that. We're going to talk much more about that, but that gap is a problem. It is that disconnect, that idea of separation of the concept of engineering and the concept of equality and a team that is a group, an organization that's representative of the society that it's providing services for is a problem, is a real problem. So we continue the adventure. So as it's very traditional rail now. Again, you've provided me a series of images, and I will go through the story of these images. So before me is a rather fetching, hyper Gothic late Victorian structure, in among some slightly more university-looking buildings, with a rather fetching sky. Poggy, tell us what's going on. Where are we and what's happening?
So that's the University of Liverpool, and that's the building that is usually put on anything related to the University of Liverpool, because it's quite an attractive building. Liverpool was the original red brick university. The term red brick comes from the red bricks used in this building, actually, at Liverpool University. And that's where my story of engineering began properly, really, back in 2008, when I started my first one of many one of many degrees that I now hold, but my first degree in aerospace engineering, with pilot studies at the University of Liverpool. But that's also where my DEI journey began. So in my time at university, I obviously had the 9-to-5, full contact engineering degree. But on top of that, I was on the student council. I was the LGBT officer for our Guild of Students. I was on the committee for the local Liverpool LGBT society. But I then also went into national student politics, and was on the National Union of Students LGBT committee and their Black Student Committee, also while trying to do an engineering degree full time.
This will become a recurring theme, folks, of the LGBT black guy being relied upon for everything. This is a running. Any women in engineering will know that you get dragged in. We'll get there, but yeah, this is a running theme, folks.
It's also a running thing that I have massively overburdened myself, and I like to keep myself very, very busy.
I wouldn't know anything about that. I organise my time very well. I never do too much.
This is where it all began. I had always had an interest in aviation. I was in the RAF cadets when I was a teenager, and worked my way up through the ranks. And then obviously studied aerospace engineering. And after university, after I travelled for a while and did all of that kind of stuff, and got that out of my system, came back to the UK and got a real job. But my first job was actually in recruitment. But it's engineering specific recruitment that I did for around a year. That I maintain was the hardest sales job I've ever had, was in recruitment. But it was basically a crash course in recruitment for me. But it also basically helped me recruit myself into my first actual proper engineering job. So it was a stepping stone, but it was one that was worthwhile doing, because I was always more interested in the commercial and project management side of engineering. I could do the technical kind of stuff, and that's what I went into in the automation game, but I was much more interested in being with people and having that more consultancy type position than sitting in an office 9-to-5. That would have driven me absolutely mad. So I went into automation as a sales engineer. So I was driving around the country, working on various different projects. No 2 days for the same. It was enjoyable for the most part.
So from Liverpool, which there's lots of people getting very excited about Liverpool University in the chat already. So it's happening. To this thing. This is a ballast undercutter. Now, I know quite a bit about this thing, because the railability ballast, not that I'm going to derail us instantly, but this thing ended up being tested at test tracks. I've got the sign here behind me here. Ended up being tested at test tracks, finally, having had so much of a headache in trying to make progress within the railways and within Network Rail specifically. Did test tracks, got out there, prove itself, and won the National Rail Award for Innovation last year, which is epic. So I do know a bit about this. The chaps, the Johns running it. It's good. It's a good piece of kit. So tell us, Poggy, what's your connection to the ballast undercutter?
So when most people think of automation engineering, you would think of and automotive plants with robotics and or some other form of factory automation, food and bev, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that is a very, very significant part of automation. But I worked in a very niche part of automation. I didn't work on the factory automation side at all. I worked exclusively on mobile plant machinery. So I worked with construction machinery, mining, agriculture, forestry, special and municipal vehicles, things like road sweepers, uh, emergency equipment, and a large part of that was the road rail construction machinery equipment. So when I started in my first organization, their only customer in the rail business was actually Railability.
Yeah.
And that's something that particular niche within the niche that I had was something that was of particular interest to me. So I spent basically my whole career then developing my name and my knowledge and expertise in the road rail construction machinery side, and that's why you see a lot of my first company, a lot of their stuff on most machines like this, and most road rail companies in the UK now use that particular organization and other organizations that I've worked for. So you don't necessarily automatically associate automation engineering with road rail, with construction. I usually think of robots making cars and things, but that was a big part of it for me, and that's what I specialized in the designing whole systems from the control systems and all that kind of stuff. And even a big part of automation is safety, so looking at things like collision avoidance systems, personnel detection. There's various different things, rail standards, and certainly in construction machinery, of trying to develop automated systems or virtual wall systems, which I developed with a few different organizations in my time as well, looking at using things like LiDAR, radar, ultrasonic sensors, stuff like that as well. So this was a very large part of my career, and that's what took me to Rail Live all those years ago, the first time I went. It's probably the best example of what I spent most of my career doing in terms of system design.
It's so interesting, and I can absolutely understand the fascination, because you were talking about things that move mounted on things that move. So it's almost like it's almost like I'm thinking of, you're talking about like double levels of movement and coordination and managing that. At least when you've anchored the first level of thing that moves to the ground, it makes it more predictable. But as soon as you add an additional dimension of movement to that, which, in the case of railways or in the case of other vehicles even more, then suddenly all that complexity is multiplied. I can see why it's fascinating. Absolutely.
It really is. It was, and that part of the job I very much enjoyed. The system design elements, the being out on the road, because I covered such a niche industry as well. It meant that I covered a much larger territory, so I was all over the UK.
Yep.
Spent years, traveling around, but also designing systems predominantly for safety, and that's, automation is about three main things: productivity, efficiency, and safety are the three big buzzwords, if you like. If a machine underperforms, if it's inefficient, or if it's unsafe, then we redesign it, and that was a big part of what I did.
And physical safety as a concept is something that we will get back to shortly, I'm sure. In the meantime,
the irony is that engineering at its core is problem solving. It's all about innovation. We spend our lives designing and optimizing systems, so it's kind of embarrassing that we're so far behind in inclusion. The workplace I was pushed out of was one where difference was seen as a risk rather than a value, where leadership was defined narrowly and inclusion was very often an afterthought, but it doesn't have to be. To the next generation, I would say this: you're entering a workplace that wasn't designed by you. It wasn't necessarily designed for you, but you get to redesign it. You get to question what true leadership looks like, and you get to rebuild those systems, not just for yourself, but for everybody who comes next, remembering that inclusion shouldn't be improvised, it should be engineered.
It's a really nice. That's a really nice bit. We jumped in there to an extract from your TED talk, which kind of shoots the fox of some of the things which you might want to talk about. But that it's an extract I just wanted to include. It's a really nice extract from your TED talk. It's a little bit quiet, which is my fault, but hopefully everyone heard that nicely. I just I want to include that. So I've got the chat. Everyone in the chat, pipe down. If you've got any questions, do at me, and we'll come in. I know the video bit, the volume there is low, but you can go back to it and boost it briefly. In fact, no, better thing to do is to go and watch the full video, for which there is a link in the chat. So in the video description, you can watch the whole thing. But Poggy, tell us about the TEDx. Tell us about the journey to that point, I guess, because that's also something that this talk gave you a bit of punctuation on.
So it was something that I've been building for a while, and I start the talk by talking about my turning points, and it was that switch from, okay, I need to stop what I'm doing and do something that matters, and I need to do something more meaningful, so I start the TEDx by talking about what happened in April of 2024. It was one of the rare times I was working from my company's headquarters down in St Albans, because I'm in that role. I was usually out and about, and I was called into one of those dreaded "Can we have a quick word" meetings, which always makes you nice and comfortable. I assumed that it was going to be okay because, so this was the final company that I worked for. I was there for 2 years, and in the second year, I quadrupled the business in my area. I had 300% growth in my area, which is something that in 1 year is quite hard to achieve. I hit a 5-year target in 1 year, and I had 10 years of consistent success behind me at that point, proving that I was demonstrably very good at my job. But I was told that despite all of that success, that my work in diversity, equity, and inclusion was a distraction, that it was making management uncomfortable, that it was limiting my career progression, and that, quite frankly, I needed to stop talking about it. Despite all of the performance targets and growing business and all of the other stuff that I've been doing, alongside also helping HR rewrite some of their policies to be more inclusive and being part of the global DEI committee within the organization, that was the point that it really hit home. I'm done. This is enough. It seems like quite a stark reaction to that, but it was just one of many things that had happened over that 10-year period, and that was the final straw for me, the straw that broke the camel's back, if you like. But it was in that moment that I made the decision to leave, but not just to leave the company, to leave the entire industry and the career that I'd been building for a decade at that point. Because not because I had failed, but I felt like I was being failed by the system, and so I wanted to try and do what I could to help design a better system. And that's essentially, I mean, it took me a while to be able to put it in those kind of words, but I mentioned before that the three words, really, the three buzzwords that you have in automation engineering is productivity, efficiency, and safety. And it was at an exhibition. It was at Intralogistics last year. No, this year. God, it feels like such a long time ago.
You've had a busy year.
It was at Intralogistics early this year, where I had an analogy. It's something just kind of popped into my head of, I spent 10 years designing systems for those three words, for productivity, efficiency, and safety, to make sure that we're getting as much as we can out of a machine. And effectively, I'm doing the same thing now, but I'm doing the same, designing systems for humans so we can get the most out of people that we can, making sure that the system is safe and efficient for people to work in. And I hadn't really made that comparison before, but that is essentially what I talk about in the TEDx, about how we design systems for machines. We know everything about them. It's a machine on a factory floor thousands of miles away, you'd be able to log into a portal and know everything about it. And yet when an engineer leaves or burns out, it comes as a huge surprise to their own organization. Why is that?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of comparison that I wanted to make in that TEDx, as well as talking about why I changed roles, but also that pointing out that it's not really that different what I'm doing now. I'm just focusing on humans rather than machines. But we need to be designing better systems for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone watching this will recognize familiar elements in that for themselves. For me over the last couple of years, I've found myself in similar circumstances with design consultancy, and had similar conversations. Patronizing senior managers saying, "Can I have a quick word?" And basically being as good a designer as they have, but not fitting the mold, frankly. I'm an extremely generic looking guy and have absolutely no diversity whatsoever other than inside my brain. But not fitting with their ideal corporate engineer mold, which is, you're allowed to do, so in your case, you're allowed to do DEI stuff so long as it doesn't inconvenience us or cause us to have to change anything. At that point, it's uncomfortable. Which is sort of similar. You can do your media stuff so long as you don't talk about anything important, impactful, or that might risk anyone having to change anything. Interesting. So I'm not going to claim that I've experienced the same things you have, Poggy, but there are some echoes there that are absolutely sort of familiar.
Definitely.
And I think there's a lot that a lot of people who are within the railway industry will hear there. Particularly, I mean, of course, what you're talking about the lack of understanding of the human system and our limits and capabilities. That I'm in an organisation where I can think of 4 staff around me who are brilliant and have burned out and are therefore no longer productive people. They're on medium-term sick leave. Shout out to all those people. I hope you get better soon. But it's a very, very common thing in the railways that people, because it's something that often brings in people who love what they do. Therefore, this will have been you. They love it. They find it fascinating. They care about it. They see that it has an immediate impact on others, and therefore it's beneficial to do that work, which means that also the health service has lots of people in it like this. They see the fact that it has a positive result. Therefore, they feel like they have to give a little bit more of themselves to it. And it's not helped if you also if you love it and live it outside of the working environment too. That magnifies the effect. And the results are that we expose people to safety risks, not of physical safety, but as I'm sure you're going to talk about, of psychological safety. And
Absolutely.
That's whether you talk about it a little bit later or want to pick it up now. That's something that I think is really interesting. That point about physical safety versus psychological safety is just such a key
absolutely.
one.
Absolutely.
But party time. This is the National Diversity Awards, and I think it's a chance for you to blow your trumpet a little bit here, Poggy. So please do.
It's not really about that. It's again something.
And you're allowed to. There's a reason why I've got my bloody award. Where is it? I can't find it. It's behind me somewhere. Yeah. Oh, it's glass, which is inconvenient. It's behind my head. Yeah. I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's something that I pointed out in the TEDx talk as well that I did, but it was the irony of having worked in the engineering sector for 10 years and then within a year of effectively being pushed out of the job that I was doing. I did leave voluntarily, but I could have taken the company to tribunal for various different reasons. I decided not to, but I now essentially I've dedicated my entire career into trying to make that better for other people going through the system. But I did find it kind of ironic that within the first year of leaving engineering, I was named in the manufacturer's top 100 professionals in manufacturing in the UK. I was a finalist at the National Diversity Awards, which, I mean, even being nominated for a National Diversity Award was incredible. How I managed to get it through to a finalist, imposter syndrome, is something I don't really understand. But when you see the level of the other people that have also made it through to being a finalist, and the similarity I make to it is, and this is a bit, but I'm going to do it anyway. Have you seen the film Legally Blonde?
Yeah.
the introduction thing. So they're sitting outside in in a park or something, and they're going around and saying how many PhDs they have, and Stephen Hawking stole his idea from me, and she's like, yeah, I've got a degree in fashion, whatever it was.
Yeah.
You fairly felt like, why am I here with all these people doing amazing work? It's ridiculous. I'm just trying to make engineering a bit better. But I mean, other things like I chaired a part of the Royal Academy of Engineering's annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference. I've spoken a few times at the Institute of Government and Public Policy. I've done so much that, and then released a book which became a bestseller, which we'll talk about a bit later as well. But I just find it so ironic that I had to leave in order to be recognised. The system didn't recognise me when I was inside it. It took me leaving in order to feel valued, and for that, the work that I'm doing to actually be recognised. And that, I think, is the experience of a lot of underrepresented professionals and people in the majority as well in engineering. The cost of visibility and authenticity is often burnout. That's a shame when we lose good people from the industry because they're not seen, or because when they are seen, it takes too much out of them.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely the case. And it's worth touching maybe on what we talked about at Rail Live, in what happens if you are in a sector where representation isn't, the representation in the sector is not the same as the representation in society, which means people are grabbing you. Essentially, if you've got a protected characteristic of any kind, and you're being, as you say, up to a point, at which point things become inconvenient, but up to that point, you're often being grabbed as the person to put here or the person to there. And even if you aren't, you feel like it's your duty. This is not me speaking from experience, but this is what you described to me, and it really felt like something that my wife has talked about, Dean has talked about before as well, is that she's having to think, and this, I suppose, particularly for women in her case, she's having to second guess every behavior and action she does in front of senior colleagues, concerned about what the ramifications or misinterpretations of those might be. Luckily, she's got loads of lovely colleagues around her, so it's not so much of an issue. But I can imagine in the rail industry where that's exactly the same for all women across. And I bet it's the same for black colleagues. They're thinking, oh, what am I being judged? What's the sort of picture that someone's got in their head that I'm being judged against, that I'm going to have to either conform to or prove that I'm not? But that feeling, right?
Absolutely, and you. Code switching, masking, all of the different centered for different situations, but all of that is a real thing. How many black women will not want to speak at any point louder than speaking volume, because otherwise they'll be accused of being the angry black woman. That kind of trope that's right there.
Aggressive. Yeah.
Exactly. So there is a lot of that, and something I talk about in inclusion moments in the book is the burden of representation. That is a very, very real thing, as being the token. Oh well, this person can do that because they identify as black, queer, disabled, neurodivergent, whatever it is. So you're rolled out or wheeled out, and any time DEI is mentioned, and it's not, even when it's not officially part of your job description, it's just it's expected of you, but it's not expected as part of your role, it's expected on top of your role. And this is something that organizations really need to stop doing, because that is work, it's helping the business. DEI does have a business case that I could go into. It really does.
Oh, that's even anyone who spends any time anywhere near. Sorry, go on, Poggy.
Well, I was just going to say, when people are expected to do their whole job to 100% and then do an extra 10-20% on top for this, and then people get surprised why people in that position burn out more frequently than people who don't. Well, if they're working over capacity continually, then of course they will.
Yeah, absolutely. It's. I'm just running through all these scenarios in my head of stories from people across the industry. I mean, you go to a YRP event, you go to any event like that, and these stories are just absolutely everywhere. And the other thing is, of course, is that if you put a foot out of line, or you make a mistake that might otherwise be, either it gets either just you feel like you can't make mistakes because you're making mistakes that won't just reflect on you, but will reflect on others. But worse,
Sure.
you're held to a different standard. You are held potentially to a different standard by management, by those in charge.
Absolutely.
And that, yeah. So this stuff, at least making people think about this stuff, is step one in acknowledging and perhaps avoiding it happening, right? So these sorts of conversations that we're having now might make people think a little bit about some of those burdens. So we've just had a question. This is a jarring shift in tone, but someone's curious about where this venue is. Where was it?
It was the Liverpool Anglican Cathedral.
So you're in Liverpool again. That's quite a nice.
It was quite
nice symmetry. Yeah. That is nice.
Yeah.
In which case, I don't mind asking, because that's a nice little symmetry to the story that you're here at this event. Yeah, and everyone looking snazzy, and the venue looking terrific, and rightly enjoying a good evening, Poggy.
No, I would highly recommend people go to that. You can buy tickets to go. It's incredible.
Yeah. So
a big thing. Yeah.
So we must press ahead, which is, here are some pictures of what appears to be Andy Murray off of the tennis, working with a spanner underneath an automobile with some computer. Go on, Poggy. Tell us what's going on. Weave us a narrative here.
This was the automation to DEI analogy that I used in TEDx.
Yeah. So
I was very aware that not everybody in the audience would be from an engineering background, and so I wanted to say it in a way that was that could reach anybody, essentially. Yep. And so I start by saying, by describing planned maintenance or scheduled maintenance, which some people will have heard of. We inspect parts every 3, 6, 12 months, however frequently the manufacturer recommends, and we do it without second thoughts. The most obvious example of this being getting a car serviced. You get your car serviced every 12 months or every X number of miles. But the process is inefficient, it's disruptive, it involves a lot of downtime. It keeps things going, but it's not the most optimized method. And I make the point that engineering, for this reason, has continued moving towards condition monitoring and predictive maintenance. And this was a large part of what I did in automation engineering for the 10 years. We designed systems, embedding sensors into our systems, monitoring things like pressure, temperature, vibration. So instead of waiting for failure to happen, we can detect early warning signs. We can get real-time data from the system and use trends and predictive algorithms to intervene before breakdown happens. So we save a lot on downtime. We improve performance, efficiency, and running of the machine. It's a far better way of doing it, and will improve the whole performance of the machine. And really, when we look at the way companies treat DEI, they're very much in the scheduled maintenance side of things at the moment. It's which can look like, for example, a typical annual employee survey that is rolled out once a year. It asks broad questions, and they hope to tackle the problems that happen to make it onto the radar using that survey. But by then, people have already disengaged, burnt out, they've left. Too late at that point. Why can't we take some of the tools that we have learned from automation engineering, from things like condition monitoring, predictive maintenance, to build in feedback loops, redundancy, and resilience into DEI? We can track things like psychological safety, workload equity, all of those sorts of things, cultural feedback, not just as a box ticking exercise or as a one-off when we have to write, the CSR report for the annual, let's make the company look brilliant.
Yeah.
But something that will actually have a meaningful input into people's lives. And it's that, coming back to that point of we have real-time data for all of our machines. We know exactly what's going on. We need to treat inclusion in the same way. We need to treat it as rigorously as we do quality control, so we can see it's not just a nice to have, it's something that makes a real difference to the performance and the value of people within our organization.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? One of the things that you have to that becomes challenging in this, that has to be thought of and managed, is in creating these tools, it's making sure that they don't end up being tools to penalize rather than tools to. So this is one of the things you have to do, is But that comes from corporate structure and corporate culture. I work for an organization right now that has a wide range of corporate cultures. Some of them are absolutely fantastic. Some of them are less so. And that's true in every organization. Some it sways more one way, some it sways more the other way. And so, there are challenges in ensuring that those tools are not misused to penalize rather than being made use of to get more out of your team. And that requires some thought. But again, you could probably think of analogies for the way that works in across back into automation again to ensure that gets managed carefully. So it is interesting. I was while you were just talking, I was thinking of ways. I'm awful at admin. How would you do this in a way that allows me to do it without it becoming its own task and sending me into ADHD chaos? And just even the sort of thing where you just have a desktop widget where you just at the end you just say if you're feeling grumpy about a thing, almost like those airport "Are you happy? Are you sad?" button press things, right?
It can be as simple as regular social conversation with a line manager that isn't predicated on "I need you to do something" as a "How are you?"
Yeah, exactly. And putting the onus onto management to actually be the ones to take the ownership of that.
Yeah, exactly. And when you look at the numbers, we do need to be doing this. We need to be treating it as a core business metric. In a survey of UK engineers, 53% said that feeling included at work increases their motivation. 45% said it improves their performance. Teams with inclusive leaders are 17% more likely to report high performance, and companies are something like 90% get something like 90% more revenue from new products and services when they have diversity as a core metric, when they have diversity in their team. The numbers are there. If we need to fly this as a business case,
if it becomes a data exercise, the data is absolutely there. In the chat, in the chat earlier, Michael C was talking about 4-day working week as a good example of this. Like, all the data is there. Not only that 4-day working week is better for well-being and resilience and giving people more time with families and generally making society better, but also on its own merits, it results in more work being done in the 4 days than would be done in the 5 days because people are happier and healthier, which means that you can pay them their current salary because you get more out of them. So it's not a case that everyone who does a 4-day working week, you reduce their salary by 4 days. It's that a 4-day working week, keep the salaries where they are, and you will get more out of those people in those 4 days. The data is for this sort of initiative, and as the initiatives you talked about, the data's there.
Well, we saw the same thing with flexible and remote working over the pandemic. That one of the few positive things to come out of that whole process, that whole experience, was us realizing that people can and often do work better at home than they would do in office. I certainly do. I'm far more productive here than in an office. There's far too many distractions. I mean, my autism comes very much into that with glaring lights and sounds and music, and I'm in much more of a controlled environment here.
But it's, as you say, it's the flexibility, the fact we discovered that you can actually creating a flexible work environment that matches the different needs of different people. As someone who sits here and hates working from home, although I've been doing quite a lot of it this year and getting better at coping with it, but just shows that the diversity of different capabilities, but the flexibility as accommodating people's flexing ability to work, their comfortable work environments, it gives you a more productive workforce. And we've seen some reversal on that by some of the big corporates actually, and public sector as well, managing that in different ways. So look, the data's there. The point of this is, your analogy is good because it points out that having those conversations, those social conversations, is really good, but also backing up the fact this is a good thing to do is a wealth of data. But one of the things I talk about in my book, also bestseller, look at this.
If we could do this work because it's the right thing to do, but unfortunately, businesses do look at the bottom line. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's slightly irritating that we have to do it on a business case basis, but even if we have to do that, fine. But also the numbers really do speak for themselves.
Yep.
Another one that I say that raises a few eyebrows is that businesses with the highest levels of gender and ethnic diversity in their executive teams are nearly 40% more likely to financially outperform the industry median. 40% more likely. Surely that's the reason why we should be doing it.
I know, it's there. It's a but
Morally,
yeah. There is that.
reasons.
There is the challenge with evidence, of course. I talk about in the book is the evidence-based paradox, which is that as both of us being proponents of evidence-based policy, is that evidence-based policy, the evidence is that evidence alone doesn't create good policy. You have to actually tell the story. So you have to have both. You have to have the evidence, and you have to be able to explain to people. And this is what's nice about the way that you structure this idea is that it allows people to go, oh yeah, and then if they need the data, it's all out there. Now, here's a bit more of a familiar view to me. It's some track and some people in orange, and it is the UK because there's I'm fairly confident it's the UK because there's a big old semaphore signal in the background, and it's the right amount of orange, and this bullhead rail which only we're daft enough to have. So, Poggy, some railways happened again. You put railway in my railway podcast. What's going on?
Sorry. So I am going to give a trigger warning at this point for suicidal ideation and self-harm. Something I talk about in quite a lot of the talks that I do is highlighting that the biggest killer of men under the age of 50 in the UK is suicide. That is a relatively well-known statistic. What's less well-known is that those in construction, manufacturing, engineering are nearly 4 times more likely to die by suicide than the national average. And particularly within this sector, within engineering construction, anything related to rail, there is a huge focus, and rightly so, on physical safety. And that doesn't seem to be translated across to psychological safety. There is a huge disconnect between those two, and that's something that I really, really don't understand. You wouldn't let somebody on a track without the correct PPE. Even at Rail Live, where I still don't really understand why they have to be wearing high vis, to be completely honest. But there's still a big focus on PPE, and rightfully so. So if we're so prescriptive about physical safety, why don't we take the same precaution with psychological safety? Because that can be just as damaging as a physical safety concern.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've come along. I hope everyone enjoyed the jarring shift in tone up there, by the way. We've come fatigue, right? We've come into a realization that fatigue, as a thing that is outside of the railway environment, for the most part, because it's driving where that risk is something we've got better at managing as a railway and understanding that. And in a way that gives me some hope, because that is something that is somewhat abstract from the sparks and hitting things and turning people into marinara. So the fact that we've made some progress in that sense does provide me make me feel a little bit of hope that we might start reaching a journey where we do start thinking about that. And those sorts of conversations are now being elevated. You are seeing some of the conversations around mental well-being being elevated. So this is one where we can be a little bit more optimistic, right?
Absolutely. There is some great work going on in rail. I mean, I've done some work with Network Rail before. I obviously went to Rail Live, had some very interesting discussions with organisations and what they're doing. There was I'm going to get this wrong now. The tent that was next to your tent, was it Rail?
It was Rail. Was it Rail Safety Week who was next to us?
Rail Safety, yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that was actually there at Rail Live, I'd never seen that before at Rail Live.
It's one of the things that. One of the things the HMRI, so the Chief Inspector of Railways, the former Chief Inspector of Railways, Ian Prosser, is very personally impacted by this and has made it, and he championed mental health and particularly in relation to suicide. And has elevated Samaritans a lot within the railways. Bessie, friend of the show as well, has done a lot of work supporting Samaritans as well. So
it was much more prominent at Rail Live this year than the previous years, and it is making a difference. Something we talked about as well is that the demographic at Rail Live was much more diverse this year than
it was noticeable. It was noticeable. It was a really nice thing. I came and I was genuinely. I've been coming to Rail Live. I've missed one Rail Live in like a decade because I had a minute toddler. So I've seen a lot of them, and there has been a visible progression. It's something that does lift your spirits a little bit in what was otherwise kind of quite a difficult year, frankly. So for the industry and that. that is indicative of progress. There is progress. So that, I wanted to do one of our ending of the year episodes. We're not finished the episode yet, by the way, but I wanted to kind of give people a bit of a hopeful note in this, in that, identifying the problem is one of the steps to solving it. And actually, in some ways, there is progress. In others, perhaps there isn't, and we might well come back to those. But it is positive.
I think in order to do something about a problem, we need to know what the problem is, and this is something that people need to be aware of. I mean, in some research that's been ongoing for a while now, it's shown that 1 in 4 engineers in the 2022 survey, 1 in 4 engineers reported having considered self-harm or suicide at that point. Over 80% reported suffering from some form of mental health or emotional health concern. So more than 4 in 5, and fewer than half of them reported feeling safe speaking to their employer about any of that. That is something that we need to be doing something about. In the same way that we treat physical safety really importantly, we need to create that parity of esteem between physical safety and psychological safety, particularly on rail. If somebody isn't fully checked in doing their job on rail because they have concerns at home, financial things, whatever it is that they don't feel comfortable talking about with people, and that then makes them distracted, then the physical safety impacts on that can be huge, not just to them, but to other people as well.
Well, we know that that's the case because we have seen rail accidents where those precise conditions have resulted in the deaths of multiple passengers, people who are traveling by rail assuming that the system around them was safe. And therefore, safety, by absolute necessity, must include the psychological safety of those who operate, maintain, design, and so on, that system. As someone who had suicidal thoughts back in 2020, I can absolutely, it was the rude awakening that made me think, maybe I should think a little bit more about what's going on inside my brain. I didn't necessarily do much about it, but it turns out understanding the problem somewhat helps to working out ways to cope with that problem. So yeah, it is something that hits home. That's for all of us. It's as you've highlighted with the numbers, more of us than we might think are directly impacted or familiar with this stuff. So, absolutely. So we go from the fact that we don't treat psychological safety of our staff and our workforce well enough, to the fact that we have a chronic shortage of those people in that workforce in the first place. Are those two things related? Question mark. Poggy, you've put some Google results up, but tell us some stuff.
I didn't really know what else to use as an image for this one, really, but I mean it doesn't. This is talked about a lot. The skills gap that we have in this sector is talked about a lot. It's very, very well known. It's estimated that we have something like 173,000 spaces between now and in X number of years, and that it's costing us around £1.5 billion annually with the shortage of skilled people in the sector that we have. Something that this inevitably leads to is talking about usually exclusively recruitment of getting people into the engineering sector. Where I have a slight problem with that is, yes, we do need more people in the sector, and it would be great to have a more diverse talent coming into the sector. But as we've just been talking about, this sector doesn't necessarily treat people all that well. And it feels a bit disingenuous for me trying to get more diverse talent into the sector when it seems sort of inevitable that they probably won't be treated as well as other people will, and then that will cause them to leave. There doesn't seem to be enough focus on the problem that we have with retention, and that is something that we really, really need to make sure that, yes, we need more people in the sector. That's great, but we need to make sure that they stay. We need to stop people from leaving. That actually might help the problem. We have such a problem with retention. It's that in just a 12-month period, I think this is between 2022 and 2023, or 23-24, can't quite remember. In a 12-month period, over 38,000 women left engineering and technical roles in the UK in just 1 year. To put that into context, that meant that the proportion of women in engineering and technical roles was decreasing. For the first time in a long time, it was actually declining. That is a problem. We need to make sure that, yes, we need to get more people into the sector, but we need to have a sector that actually treats people well, so those people want to stay, Because if you have, it's the leaky bucket analogy. If you have a massive hole in the bottom of the bucket, it doesn't really matter how much water you keep pouring into it; it will just keep coming out.
100%. And it's interesting. I was hosting a young rail professionals politics and rail event a few weeks back, and my first opening question, partly because the organisers had really struggled to get a senior woman in rail to be on that panel, was, why are we doing such a bad job of retaining specifically senior women in the industry? And it was interesting that some of the responses, it's Chatham House rule in there, but I could kind of broadly say that some of the responses from the panel were around kind of a little bit defensive and a little bit like, well, no, actually, I think we have brilliant women in the industry as leaders. They're brilliant and they do brilliant. And it's like, I'm not saying that the women leaders in the industry aren't brilliant. I'm saying that there are not 52% of the leaders being women, and given that is the percentage of the population that are women. And there are no reasons why it shouldn't be closer to representative of the population, rather than across the industry, including leaders and everyone else, 17%, I think, are women in the rail industry. I think that's around about the number. That's...
Seems about right. It's about 15 point something percent in engineering now. So
more broadly, I think 70% might be in the railways, which is possibly because we have non-engineering within that, so that might change those numbers a little bit. But it's still, and there are bits of the business where there's points of light. There are some bits of the industry that have over 50% women in them, but often the nature of their business or the size of their business allows that to happen. But yeah, there are challenges and it's not, as you say, recruitment is one thing, but it's just in the same way that if there's no obvious physical engineering work going on, kids aren't going to join as apprentices. If there's no obvious, the High Speed Rail College wondered why no one was joining the High Speed Rail College as government was cancelling, lopping bits of HS2 off. Kids aren't idiots. They're going to go, why would I do that? It's the same if there is an obvious challenge. Firstly, if they can't be seen if they don't see themselves in the industry, literally, but also if they are, again, not idiots, if they're seeing that there is a distinct lack of people reaching levels of seniority who look like them, who live a life closer to theirs, then they're not going to waste their time. There's other places they're going to go. It's a very obvious waste of time, frankly, and a patronising waste of a lot of people's time to spend a huge amount on the recruitment side and ignore retention. Absolutely. Before I do a little bit of a mid-reel ad, look at this. Look at these two happy people. This looks suspiciously like... this is the House of Parliament in the background, and you can see Portcullis House. But where are we actually here? Tell us what's going on here, Poggy. There's some...
This was an event that was done by BTSY, the British Tunnelling Society youth members. So it was an event called Celebrating Pride in June of this year. June or July of this year. And Fiona Connor, who I think you know as well.
I do. Hello, Fiona.
So Fiona and I co-chair Inter-Engineering, which is a network of queer engineers in the UK, and we were asked to come and talk at this event and facilitate one of the panels there. And it was a brilliant event, and it's really just the main point I wanted to make here is how powerful networks can be, employee resource groups, either within an organisation or multidisciplinary or cross-sector networks like Inter-Engineering, to improve things like improving retention, improving well-being, leading advocacy for DEI and policy change within organisations, helping with things like CPD, with leadership experience, just giving a voice to employees, being a safe space that people can come to talk with other people in similar situations, and whatever they need to be, they can be very, very powerful things that can help in a lot of different ways for some of the topics that we've talked about here. They can contribute in a lot of ways to mental well-being, policy change, all of those types of stuff. And companies with diverse networks and inclusive policies usually have lower turnover and higher productivity. It's something that, again, could be part of a safety system, a safety culture within an organization, giving people a space to have a voice, essentially.
Yeah, it's It's nice to see Fiona grinning, looking very pleased there. I'm glad we reached the middle of it, or the kind of we're nearly at the very end actually. But I'm glad we kind of it's a nice moment to see happy people achieving good things. And again, it's one of those situations where you can see the positive you can see all the positive outcomes are all there laid out for all to see. But also my recommendation in any situation like this is for people to get stuck in actually. Again, cognizant of everything we've said previously about burnout and about the fact that a lot's on you, but get stuck in and you feel the benefit of being involved in these sorts of groups and organizations. Yeah. So, very briefly, the mid-reel ad for the bonus people, £5 and above tier patron supporters, you get a bonus episode tonight, and we are going to be mucking around with my gigantic CAD model of Britain and looking at what we think in advance of an episode early next year. We're going to do some of that legwork, but in a bonus episode where we can talk through it. So I thought that'd be fun to do. So come join that bonus episode, dear bonus people. I owed you a good one, given I've given you some rubbish bonus episodes recently, so I thought I'd give you some real juicy sauce. Anyway, we must talk about inclusion moments because, Poggy, this book, you should be extremely proud of it reaching varying level, bestseller on multiple platforms, I believe. Here it is, inclusion moments. Tell us about the book. Tell us about the story behind the book, and a little bit about how it's landed, and tell us where things are at.
So I've never planned to write a book. I've somehow managed to accidentally write a book, which I think is possibly one of the improvements of my life. So it was at various networking events that were part of the National Diversity Awards, actually, where I was asked 3 times by 3 different people in the space of about 2 weeks whether I'd written a book, to which my answer was obviously not. I don't have time. I've got a full-time job. I run into engineering. I'm doing a full-time doctorate for some reason at the same time. Coming back to I do massively overburden myself. So of course I don't have time to write a book. But what I had been doing basically all year was putting out a series of LinkedIn posts that I had always called inclusion moments. And the aim of those was just to give a different perspective, to allow people to step into my world a little bit and see some of the things that happen to me, and just as micro interactions, microaggressions, micro inclusions, things just to make people think a little bit. And so when I was asked multiple times if I'd written a book, and somebody said something, and somebody called G, who's also written quite a few books, and G said, you've probably, in the role that you're in, you've probably already written 90% of one without really realizing, knowing full well that would plant a seed, which it absolutely did. So I went and pulled all of these inclusion moments together, and it turned into a book. It was published on the 31st of October. It became a bestseller in 3 different categories on Amazon on day 1, which was not expected. But the main point of this really is that inclusion, when we think about inclusion in engineering, it's very easy to think of the huge organizations, Network Rail, Rolls-Royce, and the multi-million-pound policies and initiatives that have whole teams of people behind it. But the point that I'm trying to make is inclusion doesn't always have to be about grand gestures or huge programs like that. It can begin in the smallest of moments, and each of us, everyone has the power to create safer systems, one interaction, one inclusion moment at a time. And that's really the point of this. It's to either to act as a lens to give people insights into different experiences that they may not have noticed, as a mirror, as a reflection, and as validation of your own experience, or as a toolkit really to give you actions that you can take forward. And maybe nothing in here is going to change the world, but it might make somebody's day, week, month, career just a little bit brighter. And if everybody can do that, then collectively it could make the world a better place, maybe.
Absolutely. Poggy, it's been an absolute delight. I've got one last little plug, a little episode tease for them. Then we'll come back and close things out. But I just want to say, I'm so pleased it's done well. I would love to be able to knock a book out as quickly as you did. Good grief, the pain that it took me to pull mine together. But I had not written 90% of a book anywhere. It turns out. But it's I'm so pleased it's done really well. And there's a link for anyone who's curious. There is a link to Poggy's website where you can head to wherever you like to buy your books and pick it up. Right. Very briefly, a little bit of a tease about what's coming up over New Year for the New Year Eve special episode. What the hell is this thing? Well, tune in to this year's New Year special Rail Natter to find out. I said it really short. Yeah, we won't worry about that, but it's been a fun episode that I've been running around doing today. I've done all the filming for it, so I'm going to assemble it, and it's your New Year's Eve special. Poggy, what an absolute delight to have had you on. I'm so glad we've done this at last. Long overdue, and just a delight. Is there anything else you want to plug? Anything you want to push people towards, or anyone you want to shout out?
To be honest.
Marvellous. No, that is...
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure and a delight. I am so pleased that we finally got around to you've been asking about this for ages. I'm an idiot. I'm the one who's delayed this, and I'm glad that we found this. And you know, we don't have to be strangers again. This, if you want to come back and tell us about something, then absolutely you must do that. Poggy, an absolute delight. For everyone in the chat, hello, goodbye. It's been nice to have. There's been some chat going on, various conversations about it all, as ever. Shout out to all of you. And given this is the last live episode, I'll say live to everyone on here. Have a good festive season. Enjoy the break. Have a good Christmas. Have a good New Year. Take very good care of yourselves. And from Poggy and I, it only remains for me to say. For both of us, in fact, to say, cheerio, everyone, cheerio.